This is SciByte, episode 76 for January 8th, 2013. Hi everyone, and welcome to SciByte, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly science show, live every Tuesdays over at 7:30 p.m. Pacific at jblive.tv, fresh for downloads on Wednesdays over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Heather. Hey there, Heather.
Hey there, Chris.
Hey Heather, happy science to you.
Happy science.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We took a few weeks off for the holidays.
Yes.
And collected a lot of science, really. Actually, that time was well spent. It wasn't wasted.
No, it wasn't.
It's like you had some sort of giant science collector, and now you're going to unspool that collection in this week's episode, right?
I'm pretty sure so.
Well, what are we talking about today?
All right, we're going to take a look at my version of the best and worst of science stories of 2012, the science behind a few New Year's resolutions, IQ scores, a Martian meteorite, curiosity news, and as always, take a peek back into history and up in the sky this week.
Right on. Well, let's start with our first news story. All right, Heather, what's our first story?
All right. Even I cannot withhold my ability to do best and worst of the year.
I love these. I love these. I can't help it.
Yes, I know. So could I. I got around to it, and I was like, oh, why didn't I do that last show? I was like, oh, yeah, we were talking about the end of the world.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right.
So
that
now,
was our last show.
So now the year finished out, the world didn't end, and we're much happier. So I'll start off with some of the worsts or retractions, which means somebody came out, published something, and then they had to go back and say take-backs.
And I should say, I think you called the whole end of the world thing.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty sure.
You were never buying it from the beginning, and I think you went on record in our last episode and said it's not going to happen.
Yep.
You called it, Heather.
I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, that did actually work out pretty. Although, I tell you, I kind of had plans otherwise too. So, you know.
There you go.
All right. So, where do we start?
Alrighty. One of the major retractions that people may remember is the faster-than-light neutrinos.
Oh, yeah.
It was back in 2011 that the story came out about, they measured neutrinos going, just a little bit faster than the speed of light. It's like 0.0025%. But then in February of last year, they came out and said, oh, wait, maybe there's some wiring issues, maybe some GPS satellite timing issues. But there were a couple of different things that weren't quite adding up for them. And it did turn out there was a loose optic fiber that was including a delay in their timing. So then they came back and said, no, wait, they are not traveling faster than the speed of light. But for a little while, everyone was questionably excited, and all the news people were crazy. And
I remember I was sort of a bit flabbergasted when you essentially at the end of what was happening, you said it kind of comes down to just a loose wire, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe after all this hubbub, it was a loose wire. Yeah,
and I feel bad because one of the first things that I'd said about it was immediately equipment.
Yeah, you did.
I blew it off,
and
then I took myself back a few steps, and then I still got a message back going, hello, these are smart people. And I was like, I know they're smarter than me. Still, when cooler stuff happens than what I expect at work.
I don't even think you first covered it when it broke in the show because you were like, this doesn't sound right. My instincts are saying, or something. Or when we did cover it, you mentioned you were skeptical.
Yeah, I think it came out that day, and I held off to look at it.
Yeah, because you were skeptical. I remember that.
Yes.
Okay.
When I have a test going and there's awesome results, I'm like, awesome results? Maybe not. All right, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good.
But, it's not something that they could have necessarily hunted down. The Large Hadron Collider, CERN, it is very, very big. It's, miles and miles across. I don't remember exactly how big it was.
Yeah, a lot of parts,
there's
a lot of wires.
A lot of things going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure.
So, couldn't blame them all that much, but it was a hope and a prayer there for a little while for people.
Yeah, it would have been cool for space travel.
Yeah, that would have been nuts.
Just would have gotten my neutrino drive, and I'd make it to Alpha Centauri in half the time.
There you go.
Wow, that was good. What's next?
Alrighty, there was some retractions from a Korean scientist named Hyung-un Moon. He had been publishing these scientific papers for years. Now, what happens is you put them up to peer review journals, which essentially means you post something, and then everybody else in the science community gets to glare and poke and, prod at whatever your results are and try to find where you've gone wrong.
Oh, kind of like YouTube comments.
Yeah, very much YouTube comments, so that they can almost kind of say, you didn't get it right, I bet I can do it righter. Okay, so not so much that way, but the whole idea is to say, hey, everybody, I've taken my look at it. What do you all think? And then once it gets through that process, then you can kind of take it a step further and say, okay, now everyone's got a chance to look at it. Now it actually means something.
Yeah, it's a vetting process.
Yeah, it's very much a vetting process before it actually goes further into the public realm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is some editors of a medical journal who actually started becoming suspicious after years of him putting this stuff through. When 4 reports came back after his publication within 24 hours. Now, generally these take weeks or months for people to write back in. So he's like 4 to 24 hours.
Pretty good turnaround.
Yeah. So then they started looking back over the years. And apparently he had created everything from Gmail accounts to Yahoo accounts to all these different things, creating different personas and reviewing his own work.
Wow.
He writes something up and then he hops over to number 3 person and says, wow, you're smart, guy. I see nothing wrong with this.
That is shady.
Yeah, but so, I mean, just in 2012 alone, 35 papers of his were retracted. He admitting falsifying data in a handful of them. And so pretty much everything got retracted. I mean, it was studies from alcoholic liver disease to anti-cancer plant substances. There was a wide range of things that he was writing about.
Wow.
Now, you get these you get retractions every year. Maybe you come out and you're like, oh, wait, further results say this. But there are cases where it is somebody fudging the data a little too much or completely falsifying data.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, actually, a 2008 study that was proposing a link between cell phone use and
cancer.
Sperm count.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sperm count. Oh, I've
Yeah.
always heard cancer.
And cancer.
Oh, okay.
So, it was making everyone kind of freak out. It's like, move the cell phone from here to there, and everyone's
Yeah.
freaking out. And that, but yeah, another paper was that, affecting sperm count as well. And then it was funny because they were published in some really obscure papers, but like some things that happened, it made the news rounds. One of the guys that was on there was, well-spoken, so makes the rounds of all the major pop media.
Mm-hmm.
It's shiny news for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year, they had to retract it because the lead author actually didn't get permission from his 2 co-authors to publish the thing. So according to the notice that they put up to retract it, there's actually a lack of evidence to say that the data had really any accuracy.
Oh.
So they kind of had to step back on that.
So the retraction was not so much that he was wrong, but they just need more proof.
That there wasn't enough data to say he was right.
Right. Okay. All right. On the sperm count one.
And they can't both.
And can't. Okay. Well, there you go. And now, do you know if they're continuing his work, or do they start from scratch?
Yeah.
How does that?
There's going to be people trying to look at his work or many other tests along those same lines. There's always people looking at how cell phones affect us and if there is any, medical claim against them.
Well, I tell you, as a long time cell phone owner and now a father of 3, it hasn't seemed to have affected me.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the data doesn't say yes, so chances are, ask the Magic 8 Ball. Chances are no.
I'm okay with carrying 2 cell phones if that's what it takes.
No, so far the data says you're out of luck.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Then it's just because I'm
or
a big
fortunately,
geek.
depending
then.
on your point of view.
All right. Well, so that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Now, what about this failure is better retraction?
There was a Dutch psychologist that claimed that failure sometimes feels better than success. He actually, said he had data and psychological examinations that said you literally feel better when you fail. Now it appears that his data almost didn't or completely didn't exist.
What?
He had 31 papers retracted last year. So it looks like he's been fabricating a lot of data.
How does he even get off doing this? I mean, how does that happen?
It's hard to say. There's so many different points of view on what people are going to do. I mean, at a certain point, are you so invested in an idea that you are so afraid it is wrong? You're so far down the path that it's just got to be right. So especially with a psychologist or, where you're just doing a social study or asking people questions, or there's a lot of different ways, even with hard sciences. I mean, everything you go through and you're like, okay, I spent the last 10 years trying to prove this one thing. Now I got diddly. I wish I had squat. Let's try to make up something. Or taking the data that you have and kind of stretching it and being like, this has got to work, right? It's got to work. Or
you're right. I can see
or
that.
you could just be people being dishonest.
Yeah.
Scientists are like everybody else. There's
or
a
somebody.
range.
I mean, people get paid off too by corporations or whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, he had another story that claimed that meat eaters were more selfish and less social than vegetarians. And now that data is pretty much in question too. Because everything else has been so kind of shady, whether it exists. Now everyone's kind of looking at that one like it might not have any data to it either.
It seems like the real damage is done, though, because the meat eater story, that one I remember circulating, and there was another more recent meat eating story about red meat.
Mm-hmm.
They also didn't really pan out, but unfortunately, the media picks it up and they run with it, and they don't ever really run the correction.
That happens so often. We've talked about it a number of times with stories that come back.
But
like,
see,
oh wait.
To me, the end result is it just confuses the public, and it also sends like this mixed message that science never really agrees. Like, oh, scientists are always saying this about red wine, and then another one's coffee. Oh, coffee causes cancer. Oh, coffee's good for you. Coffee's bad for your stomach. Coffee's good for your digestive system. Goes back and forth. What do scientists know?
Scientists do argue a lot.
They do.
But there are some test results that are clear, and then there are a lot of the biological tests that really aren't clear.
And then the way that just certain elements of the debate at different stages percolate up into the mainstream, and then the corrections or adjustments, they don't ever quite percolate up, so they, like, this mythos just goes out.
Oh yeah. Well, there've been a couple times, that we mentioned here, or other times that it's, some little obscure thing that some intern catches on to. And they're like, oh my gosh, trying to make themselves climb up the ladder maybe, or look really cool, or just somebody along the line goes, hey, that's eye-catching. That's a crazy headline. Let's lead with that.
Right,
then,
you want to be the guy that got 100,000 visits for that story.
Yeah. Well, they want to. Yeah. So, unfortunately, that's not always the way. Yeah, that's not really how science works.
No.
You have to kind of have your skeptical pants on and actually look at what's going on. So,
and tune into SciByte.
Yep, go into SciByte.
All right.
So every year it'll happen. But moving on from the bad.
Okay.
We've got my top 4 science stories of 2012. They're mine. So some of them will appear on other awesome ones that appear everywhere in the internet's webs.
But they're just ones you've personally picked out from the ones that we've covered that you liked a lot.
Yep. I kind of looked over some of those lists and kind of looked over things to remember what all happened in 2012. But these are my top 4 that I think.
Okay. And boy, you know what, folks, if this is maybe your first SciByte, Heather has links to all the previous episodes where we went really in depth on these. And if you kind of want like maybe a good starting point in the SciByte series, this episode would probably be a good referral to some of the key episodes to catch up on.
Yeah.
All right, so what do we got, Heather?
Alrighty. My number 4 story is kind of dual. I call it the extremes. First, we had James Cameron, who went alone in the Challenger Deep Trench. It is 36,000 feet below sea level.
Right.
It is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Only 2 other humans had ever visited there. And he went down in his little sub. And, took some pictures and did all sorts of things, so...
Yeah, I remember how incredible this story was, just in the sense that, wait a minute, James Cameron, isn't he just some director? And wait, he's breaking records in this crazy little submarine machine?
Yeah, and he was talking about re-releasing, Titanic, and all that kind of stuff was happening about the same time, so... But yeah, it was kind of odd because these deep sea adventures.
That's right. There was a little kind of cross promo with the Titanic.
Yep, I remember that coming about where everyone kind of went, "Cool, but timing?" ? What are you that mission itself, the images and the science it brought back are still something.
Yeah.
No matter what reason he may have done it for.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that have happened in history that kind of have ulterior motives behind them.
Yeah, and when private people are doing these type of things, even if they have a cajillion Titanic dollars in their pocket, then it is interesting. And on the other side is still extreme in the other way. That was Felix Baumgartner when he made his Red Bull Stratus jump.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep, 128,000 feet. That's over 24 miles, 39 kilometers. That was back in October. And he broke the speed of sound, actually. They did actually measure that. And he said he didn't really feel anything. There we go. So
I remember the thing that really stands out to me about this whole jump that he did is he just kind of fell. He just kind of like, no big, just boop, and it just falls off the edge of the world.
Kind of get to the edge of it, and then it was like he'd specifically practiced. He's like, okay, I just got to get to the edge of this, and then bunny hop off. And that's how he said it. But it wasn't because there was a lot of question about whether he would feel the sonic boom when he broke the speed of sound, because no person had ever done so without an aircraft around them. So it was some question about what would happen.
What did happen?
Nothing. He said he didn't feel anything at all.
Okay, now, so wasn't there... was it after the sonic boom where there was like some sort of period where he started flipping over and over, right? And it kind of made him a little disoriented, and he kind of cut.
Yeah, that was right at the first, and that was kind of expected. Jumping at that height, a skydiver can kind of put their hands out and stabilize themselves.
Yeah, sure.
Except the air is so thin, there was nothing. He had essentially no push. There was. Think of a skydiver as kind of swimming almost in the air. There was some molecules there to push off of to help stabilize. But where he jumped, the atmosphere was so thin, you couldn't really. So any little minor movement could throw him into a spin, which happened.
Yeah, okay.
So they kind of they were talking to him. You watched it that day, you can kind of hear them like, hey, hi, let's see how much brain is to your blood.
Right. Blood to your brain.
But yeah, I remember I remember watching that that morning or that day. And I remember they got up to the top, as they were trying to stabilize the height. And he kept rising higher and higher. And I was worried because I had some projects that were, zero pressure balloon, which was just like that.
That's right. Yeah, I remember you talking about this.
Yeah, and if you get to a certain height, it pops. And so they had a backup system, so he could ride all the way down. It would have been a really rough ride when landing, but it was getting up there and the height and the altitude kept jumping. And I was like, they're probably thinking this too. They're like, all right, we want to go, but we need it to be somewhat stable. We don't need them to be rising in altitude too much. So it was probably a stressful few minutes for somebody. I know it was for me.
Do you also remember the sort of not not as big of a deal, but related story was the just massive records this thing crushed for live streams. It was like the number one. It was, I forget the number now, but it was really impressive.
Oh yeah, not just, it wasn't just the science and everything that happened with him jumping. It was how many people were watching him.
Right, and it was sort of one of the first kind of like you could do a real live, world event that a lot of people could catch online. That's just really cool. Really neat.
Yeah.
And, Red Bull got a lot of good PR out of it.
Oh, yeah. I liked the Twitter that you posted. If somebody had two monitors side by side, Linux Action Show on one and watching the live stream on the other.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that was happening during last. In fact, the week that happened, we watched, the jump happened in between segments, so we watched it. And I took those outtakes and I put them at the end of the episode. That was really exciting to watch that live. So everybody got to see our reactions to it live, too.
Yeah.
That was neat. All right. Wow, that is extreme.
Yeah, so deep into the ocean and up into the high atmosphere, some different extremes. That's why they kind of went together.
Where do we go
My
next?
number 3 story was the Dragon spaceship. This is the first private cargo mission that was sent to the space station.
Right.
SpaceX was able to send up over 1,000 pounds of, they called it non-critical cargo, which is like food, water, clothing, computer hardware, all sorts of different stuff. Essentially, it was things that were not mission critical. So NASA said, okay, you try, but we're not pinning all our hopes on you, because at the last moment they still could have backed off and said, no, something's not quite right. We don't want you to hook up to the space station today. But they did it, and it was very exciting. I remember watching that as the arm reached out to grab.
Yeah.
And then started pulling it in when it finally docked. And it was funny. You could see, at one point they had some pictures of all the astronauts in the space station kind of inside the Dragon capsule. And it wasn't built for humans. It was just cargo, but they were all sitting in there and they're like, hey, we're less cramped than we are in the Soyuz launch vehicle. They're like, hey guys, let's move forward on that human counterpart, which they are. They are working on another, the next stage in their program is to actually start putting seating and everything so they can bring up astronauts. Now, SpaceX already has their contract for another 12 resupply missions. The first one actually launched in October of 2012. But the private space industry really became frontline news with that and made some huge strides and some huge firsts. So that was very exciting for me.
Yeah, that was a great one for the show to cover too. Just because you were on that, from very early on. You've been following that story, so the show's been following that, and then the delays, right? Yep. But it kind of played into the anticipation a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's and it's what happens, especially with launch vehicles. You'll come out right at the last minute, and then wait, there's a delay.
Yeah.
There's the weather happened, or some sensor's gone off in the wrong way, and it's just all those kind of things that you have to play it on the safe side. So there's a lot of callbacks, but yeah, I'm being somebody who I'm very attuned to all the private space industry stuff. So that was definitely something I had been watching for a long time, and I was very excited to see it come to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it's and not just that, but successfully, and now beginning the next stages of that relationship, and really like the fact that it didn't blow up is really great. The fact that it didn't crash into the station, anything.
Yeah, I didn't think that was going to happen. They'd already had like another mission that it wasn't quite as well known, that they had to go up and just like hang out. I don't know if exactly, like essentially a mile. I don't know the exact distance, but their whole plan was to go up there and hang out a certain distance away from the space station for a little while and then land. That's all they could do. They just had to prove that they could get up to the space station and match orbit. So there was a number of different things that NASA required from them to do to prove that they could do before they got to come close to the space station. And even in that mission, there were like, I don't know, there may have been 5 or 6 stopping points where it was, come to this position, hold. NASA says you have the green light. Then you get to a certain point, they had red light. It was red light, green light, all the way to the space station. But they were able to get there, and they have their big contract, so I'm glad about that. And hopefully some of the other major corporations will be able to move forward as well.
I got to agree. That's definitely got to be one of the highlights of 2012.
Yes.
All right, so what is number 2 then?
My number 2 might startle a few people because number 2 is where I put Curiosity. The Curiosity rover.
The landing on Mars.
The landing on Mars.
And
touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
That historic moment where everybody freaks out.
Yes. Yes, and my IRC chat, Nick, being Mars based, I was totally, unbiased in the whole Mars thing, but it didn't quite make my number 1.
I am shocked.
I figured that would shock a few people.
I am completely shocked by that because I don't know if I cannot relay to you how awesome the experience it was. Just NASA went all out with 3D real-time reenactments on my computer, and I have a 30-inch screen here, and I had it full screen, and I was watching that, and then I had another screen with multiple monitors going, watching different live streams, chatting in our chat room. I mean, it was incredible to watch it happen. So for me, it was I think, the highlight.
Well, there were a lot of nail-biters there for NASA as well. It was the first of its kind landing. I mean, all the other, you've seen the big, essentially airbags bouncing around Mars. That's how they've landed before. This one had the jetpack. So essentially it had high-speed parachutes that brought it in, and then it had a little jetpack that popped off and hovered it down, lowered it via crane.
It was crazy.
So there are all sorts of things that so could have scarily gone wrong. But they hit a hole in one. The rover landed less than 1.5 miles from the center of their target landing area. So they said, this is the landing area we want. There's the center point. They landed 1.5 miles away from that.
And let's not forget one of the other really awesome, look at them go, is when they timed it so that way the reconnaissance orbiter would get a snapshot of the lander landing.
Yes.
Just so slick.
Oh, I know. For something like that, you really plan ahead and you talk to the other teams. You're like, okay, guys, we can totally do this.
I mean, it's not like you're driving to somebody's house and I'm going to be there in about a half hour. My Tom says.
Yeah. It's not quite that.
No, it was great. And it's going to, not only was it a great story for 2012, but we're going to keep getting great stories.
Oh yeah. It's
all 2013.
Yeah, for 2013 and beyond, hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's done this thing. It's found presence of various things of life. It's seen location, where all the elements necessary that could be for life, that would be required for life. I've seen the presence of running water. There was he said, okay, the analysts and that analytics of this area say that there was a stream flowing here. It was going this speed. It was this deep. So there are all sorts of things. Not necessarily, we've known that there was water on Mars. But it was giving us a better idea of what was going on in that location, that there was a nice stream, how long it lasted. So it's been, a lot of interesting things have gone on. And here recently they found they said they identified some possible simple organics, some carbon maybe, but they weren't quite sure yet. Just before, carbon might be more indicative of life or past life, but they're still not quite sure whether that was from Earth or actually they found it on Mars. So they'll have to do a couple more tests in different locations to see what they find.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, what do you say we take a page from big media and take a quick break before we reveal the number 1?
Alrighty.
Little dramatic build up there before our pause. Just a real quick mention, just to remind folks, Jupiter Broadcasting, as you know, is funded primarily. The main source of our funding comes from our audience. And there's a few different ways you can do that, and I just want to remind you that we have these browser extensions, and we have these linked at the bottom of our website. If you install this Chrome extension or this Firefox extension, then when you shop at either Amazon or Netflix or Newegg or any other, we have a bunch of sites actually that are in the extension too. It'll automatically tag a portion of your shopping session to be contributed to Jupiter Broadcasting. Now, just a note, the Chrome extension just recently had an update to add additional support for Amazon Canada. And so you might see it pops up and says, "Hey, I need more permissions." That's just we're not actually doing anything more. They just sort of redefined what permissions do, and so that's why it says that. So if you see that, you have to say allow, and you might double check your extensions in Chrome to make sure it's turned on, because it might have gotten turned off because of that. And it shouldn't be a problem anymore. Also, just a note for you Amazon customers in Canada, Amazon launched Amazon Prime for Canada today, and I'm a longtime Prime member. And when you're shopping over at Amazon, either in the US, Canada, UK, wherever you might be, we'll have a link to this in the show notes. I want to make a recommendation this week for Firefly. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That Firefly, right, Heather? I mean,
yes.
It's the Firefly. Everybody knows about that. But this is the complete series on Blu-ray, $21.99 from Amazon. And if you haven't picked this up yet, you need to do it. You need to do this. This is a must-watch. This is really good. So Firefly is our pick this week. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. And if you click that link, then a portion of that purchase will support this here show. And we appreciate everybody who does that. All right, Heather. We did the dramatic build-up, I think.
Yes.
So now should we do the big reveal? If landing a machine with a laser attached to it with rockets didn't make your number one.
No, not quite.
What did make your number one?
The Higgs-Boson.
Oh.
Yes, scientists at CERN, they used the Large Hadron Collider to detect a particle whose characteristics match those of what we think the Higgs boson should be. Now, the Higgs boson is the particle that we think is part of a field, and that's responsible for giving everything mass. It means that the mic that I'm talking to actually exists. It has mass. The computer in front of you, or whatever your earphones or speakers that you're listening to, has mass. Gave everything a reason that it could actually be. Now, it's definitely a boson, which is a type of particle, but to identify it specifically as the Higgs, they're taking a little bit more time to analyze all its characteristics, its spin, its exact weight. Now, they've come out every couple months, and they've had some more data. The last batch of data that I saw said that they were much closer to saying, yes, we're almost absolutely sure that this is the Higgs boson.
I don't know if I still fully understand what this means. So matter is made from this particle?
Think of it as, all right, think of a crowd in a mall. So this is early in the morning. There's only the, few people, sometimes older folks, walking the rounds of the mall, doing their walk. So there's not many people, and you're cruising down the aisle. You're able to go really fast because there's nothing really there. Now, Christmas time, Black Friday, 10,000 people are there. You're going really slow. So the people are like a field, or like the Higgs field. And so it's slowing you down just enough. And that's kind of what gives you mass. It means that without it, atoms would just be flittering around at the speed of light, or whatever it is, or whatever they would be, but nothing would be able to be cohesive together and make anything.
It's the glue.
Yeah, it literally is. It's the glue that exists to sort of catch everything and let it be solid matter. So it's a very, one of those basic tenets of physics that is going to have an effect on a really wide array of sciences. In physics in general, of astronomy, cosmology, all these type of things. So getting one step closer to that was pretty amazing. There were a lot of talk about making it the Nobel Award, but that didn't happen. Well, really because it wasn't a for sure answer yet or not. But the only reason there was pressure is because you can see in the show notes I said there's a Peter Higgs reaction. It's older gentleman. You kind of see him wiping his tears away, and that is one of the essentially original 3 men who hypothesized that this would exist. They said, "All right, here's our theory. This is what it should be. This is how it would act." And now, finally, we're able to see into that, see those results, and able to measure them. And they're much older gentlemen, and they were essentially assumed that they would never see it in their lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that would be pretty powerful.
They're like, you know what? I never expected my theory to actually go many places when I could actually see it. So I was kind of happy for them.
The other thing is they're taking so much care here because if this is right, it answers a lot of really big questions, right? I mean,
it becomes, it is a variable, X or N that we might have learned in school. It's not a question mark. Then X becomes something. And that can lead on to a whole bunch of other answers and fill in the blanks here or there, make, mess answers up that we think are right elsewhere. It'll make things be happier and make things sadder.
Right. I was thinking that same thing. And that's always entertaining from our perspective.
Yes. Where we go, didn't think that was going to be there. Let's see. Let's go back.
Yeah, the Mars rover will be running for years, and we'll hear stories about it from years, but this number 1, the Higgs-Boson story, is probably going to be playing out for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, it is a stamp in science history books.
Yeah.
That is it. It is a stamp. It is there. That is going to be there.
Yeah.
So it was actually very exciting. I kind of, at first glance, I thought, oh, of course, Curiosity is going to be my number 1. And then I was looking at all the stories. I'm like, no, actually, pretty sure this one beats it out.
That must have been a tough call, though.
It was right at first, but I had to unbias myself just enough to say
it seems like the right
that is a big enough thing that happened in 2012.
In terms of what we experienced personally, I feel like the Mars landing had more of a personal impact on me. Oh, yes. But, it affected, and so many people more saw that happening, and it affected more people to kind of see it happening. There weren't many people who had the Twitter stream up on their Kindle and trying to go to sleep, waking up and checking it. Your Kindle. I had work the next day. My husband's like, you need to sleep, you have to drive in the morning. I'm like, okay. So I left suggested, so I had my Kindle next to my bed. So had it set up for a couple Twitter streams. So I'm like, sleep, wake up, ooh, check. Okay. Essentially, it happened, and I roll over, and I'm like, look, it happened. That's nice. Talk to you in the morning about it. But that's kind of how it was. I was like, okay, I'm happy now. The other really awesome thing about 2012, and it's just going to be true in 2013 too, is how much of this stuff, there's a lot of media. Some of the events actually happened live. I mean, a lot of the ones we talked about actually were live streamed. But then even some of the other ones, the YouTube videos are aplenty afterwards. Where
yes,
and that's so the access to that's neat for you and I too. But even kids and stuff that's way cool. Just have that all available.
It's not just you or me, a random person, 272, putting up these type of videos. NASA and JPL and Discovery News and all these kind of major entities have YouTube accounts, and they're really active about putting snippets of what's going on
Mars
up on
their
tweets. Website.
So, right?
So a lot of good video up there too.
Yeah, I mean, almost every major NASA thing has a Twitter account. They're just all about it now.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, all right. So there you go. Heather has a million links in that block of text in the show notes, including our previous coverage, updated links to newer versions of stuff, videos to what we talked about, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, that'd also be a great point for jumping into previous episodes of SciByte to sort of get caught up on some of the big stories. And you'll probably be hearing updates, at least on some of these, in future episodes. All right, Heather. Well, with all that filed, then I believe it's time for the News Bite. All right, Heather, what is our first story in the news bite?
All right. I spent a whole bunch of time talking about 2012. But 2013, we're here. People make New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do. Sometimes they last more than 2 weeks. But they make a lot of New Year's resolutions. One of the top ones is about dieting.
Yeah.
Now, of course, on the whole, at first glance, losing weight, you can, adjust your cholesterol, your blood pressure, triglycerides, blood sugar, all those kind of things can improve. But the problem lies in if you yo-yo diet. Essentially, it goes so crazy that you lose a whole bunch of weight, but there is no way in the world you can keep that strict regimen up. And so you gain it all back. Now, all of those things, cholesterol, blood pressure, all of those come right back to where you were. But in some cases, they get even worse.
Yeah.
So much of it is about maintaining a healthy weight, not worrying so much about, it's really hard to say, not worrying so much about a couple of numbers on a scale that you step on. It's about what is healthy and changing your overall diet and lifestyle so it's something you can actually keep up. Like, there is no way in the world I could have a diet that says I could never have a chocolate chip cookie or never have a bowl of ice cream.
Right.
There is absolutely no way I could keep to that. So I have to be realistic. I have to say, okay, I have to write it in so that I can occasionally have a little bit of ice cream or chocolate chip cookie.
It's got to be a lifestyle.
Yeah. So you just have to make it and realize what you can do.
Yeah.
You know what? Even if it's not what you want to get to, you're like, all right, I want to eat out less than 2 times a week. If you eat out 4 times a week, just shrink it by a little bit. Every little bit helps.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about that.
It's tough, the quote-unquote yo-yo diet and the sort of effect it can have on, actually ending up with the end result of adding weight. That can be really discouraging.
Yeah, you can, end up with that. And like I said, the health benefits are far outweighed when you regain all that weight to you feel make it even worse.
You feel for people because it is challenging.
It is incredibly challenging.
We're kind of programmed, I think, to look for sort of a fast solution. So there's that to go up against. And then, two, there's so many different options on the market that, if you consume too much of any of it, it's bad for you. And it's just kind of plentiful in everything now. So it's a very hard time.
Yeah, and I mean, the other half of that is exercising. So you're going to go extreme on the dieting, which is not good. And then you're going to go extreme on the exercise, which you don't have to do. Now, there's been a study about Olympic medalists. They live longer than the general population. Regardless of their country of origin, what medal they won, what type of sport they played. So, it seems kind of obvious to me. Person who is on the Olympic team and is doing all sorts of really smart exercise, food stuff.
And I'm sure good diet, yeah.
Yeah, good diet is going to be slightly healthier than me. Okay, I can accept that. But the thing that I noted that was interesting is that, first, gold, silver, and bronze didn't make much difference as to health or survivability.
Okay.
And in fact, you had medalists except for where you have power sports, where it's, very physical boxing kind of things where you're really hammering your body. Then it's not so good. But in general, they tracked almost 10,000 athletes who took part in at least one Olympic game between 1896 and 1936. So 43 different disciplines, of sport. So different levels of exercise, different levels of physical contact.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that essentially golfers had about the same as swimmers, that there was really not a significant amount of difference depending on the sport.
So that would seem like a golfer and a swimmer have not just a slightly different exercise regime, but probably a pretty totally different exercise regime, right?
Yeah. Well, the point is...
So is it more about diet?
Well, eating healthier and just 20 minutes a day of some sort of physical activity. I mean, a golfer is walking around There is a
Yeah,
lot of effort and, thought, mentally effort and swing, but there's a lot of walking around the green and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, 20 minutes a day high cardiovascular, cycling, rowing, gymnasts, tennis, none of them really, I don't think it came down to all the way golf per se, but fairly close. But even tennis. So there was a lot of different, how moderate or how severe the cardiovascular activity was or how intense the sport was. And, it only got you so much extra. So, it's really kind of clues you in that you don't have to go crazy. Just some sort of activity is going to do you.
Yeah.
You don't have to go crazy on the diet. You don't have to go crazy on the exercise. So it's not as scary as it might think. It's just taking it smart and hopefully being able to last more than 2 weeks.
Yeah. That's key, right? Pick something that you can.
Yep, that you can do and take whatever steps you can and don't worry about if it's as far as you quote or unquote should go.
All right, Heather. Well, that is the 2Byte news. That is the news bite. But now it is time to unveil the 2Byte news. What? Not that one. Not that one. I said the 2Byte. No. See, this is what got me all tripped up. You know what I do?
You had the band queued up the wrong song.
I did. I blame the holiday break. They didn't practice. They drank too much eggnog. You know what happens.
Yeah, they're hungover. Poor band.
All right, here we go. Now they're ready. All right.
Okay.
This next story, I think, grabbed a lot of people's attention this week. Definitely caught my attention, and I cannot wait for you to tell me about it. I want to read the headline, though, because I know everybody's been waiting all episode. The IQ score is not all that is cracked up to be. Is this true?
Yes. Well, I've kind of thought this for a long time. It's not obvious. One test is not going to give you all the answers. And they've actually created the largest online intelligence study on record. Now, they kind of thought that they would post it and get, a couple hundred results. They had over 100,000 participants from all over the world. Now, they asked them to respond to 12 different tests, looking at memory, reasoning, attention, planning abilities, and then a survey about, your background, your lifestyle habits. Like I said, they expected a few hundred responses, but they had a little bit more than that. People of all ages, cultures, creeds from all corners of the world. And so what they're able to do is take this wide range and really kind of compare, contrast everything. And what happened was it came down to essentially 3 components: short-term memory, reasoning, and verbal. And then they use some fMRIs, which is functioning MRIs, which is essentially looking at it while your brain is active doing something. So they were able to kind of map out what was going on. So there is the IQ test itself really wasn't giving the whole answer. So if you don't score what you think you should there, it's not really that big a deal. Because if it was a more complete, rounded test in multiple different ways, you might score very well somewhere else. If I think about it, I could take a test and, score fairly well. And then somebody in a more, work color, job could have to take it and not do so well. But they could do, I've seen guys who can do sine and cosine in their head and fractions to decimals. They just know it because they have to know it for their job. Now, could they sit down and take a 2-hour test and do as well as me? Probably not. But they are really intelligent, just in a different way that specific, an IQ test by itself couldn't measure properly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and oddly enough, it came down to a couple of different things. Oddly enough, people who played video games regularly did significantly better in reasoning and short-term memory.
Hey-o.
Yep. So, and smokers performed poorly on the short-term memory and verbal factors.
Womp womp.
And people who suffer from anxiety did bad on short-term memory in particular. So gamers now have short-term memory, so they'll remember for about 5 minutes if they have a good reason to play video games. Smokers will forget that smoking is bad for them and not talk about it.
Right.
And then people who are having anxiety problems, this will freak them out even more.
Now they're really nervous.
Yeah, they get really nervous and then mess with their short-term memory even further. So.
It is interesting, though, because, whenever we try to... So I believe... Oh, gosh. And so isn't there even some question on how the original IQ was really kind of formulated? And anytime we kind of try to put, like, one number on something about us, it's never like, well, that's not the whole story. Like, you hear a lot of people that will dispute BMI as a number that you can refer to as solid for, a health indicator. And it's kind of the same story there, where there's kind of some iffy science behind it, but it's just kind of been adopted as something we accept, and we kind of need these numbers and these indicators for certain things. Like the original, I believe it was a French psychiatrist who originally came up with the IQ formula, and it was to determine if students should be in special services or should be in regular classes. And they needed some sort of system for that. Yeah,
there are some scales and tests that are made to say, all right, this is just a basic kind of get a general idea of where to go. And then they just get so harped upon and you get so caught up in them. And it really is, like you said, it depends on a lot of how it's given. Was it early, I forget when, but was there a great increase in the number of immigrants in the U.S.? There were some lobbies that said, no. The immigrants that we're getting aren't smart. They're, but what they did is they made this test to prove it. Well, you can't really see my quotes, but you could kind of hear my quotes around that. And so they wrote this test out, and it was in English and making lots of references to American baseball or, essentially pop culture. This is for people coming from outside the country. So, of course, they might not do so well talking about what happened in the third game of last year's season or who's dating who.
Yeah, that's kind of at their disadvantage.
Yeah, so they specifically did that in a disadvantage. Now, in that case, they wrote it for that purpose. But there could be lots of, tests where it is sort of eked that way as well without it meaning to.
Huh. There you go. Interesting. And Heather has a link to the story on the IQ myth if you would like to read that, because I know that got a few people's attention. Now, Heather, we have a few stories here that, guess what? Have some updates.
Yeah. Sort of an update. We have Martian meteorites. We come across them every once in a while. Now, a new one, very rare, came up with minerals more than 10 times the amount of water than any previous Martian meteorite.
Ooh.
Now, it actually took a little bit of time for them to kind of recognize what this was, because all the Martian meteorites that they have are, they've got a green hue to them. This one is black, baseball-sized stone. Less than a pound, but it just looks so incredibly different from anything else. Found in Northwest Africa, is actually the second oldest. There's 110 meteorites that we found that originate from Mars. This is the second oldest one. The only other older one is the ALH 8401. That is the one that they saw the great debate about fossilized little organisms that they had the debate on. Is, yes, that's evidence of ancient life on Mars. And then another part of the community said, no, that's totally not. So that's the only older meteorite there is. So what essentially this does is it gets us a standing point. We see how much water was on Mars at a specific point. And it actually is more water than we thought. So it's kind of tweaking how the history of Mars went through. So it was interesting, kind of all of these kind of give us a post-stop along the map of what happened in the history of Mars, how fast it lost its atmosphere, how fast it lost, its water.
Yeah.
So we kind of, each one of these, we kind of adjust the model of what's going on.
Right. Get a little more info, get a little bit of the puzzle, as it were.
Yep, and get a little bit better idea of what happened.
Piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's head up to Mars. What do you say? You ready?
Yeah, let's
And
go.
liftoff of the Atlas V with Curiosity.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
All right. So
Yeah, totally talked about this earlier. Still excited now.
Yep. All right. So we got a little Curiosity update, don't we?
Yep. Now, actually, we had a holiday break. Scientists needs holiday break sometimes too.
What?
They had their first 3 months of that mission were kind of hard, kind of tough. So they actually got to have a little bit of a break.
Aw.
So even though it's been a long time, only so much has happened. We had a nice big drive of about 10 feet that brought the missions. They've actually went a total of 2,303 feet. So now they're in this little area where it's kind of flat, lighter tone terrain from where they were, where they spent the first 4 months. So over the holidays, they took a lot of imaging, kind of decide where they wanted to go, what they wanted to do.
What's
And
next?
on January 3rd, they actually reached out the arm so that they could start looking at it. And they're working on getting they've used their dust removal brush. Essentially, they reached up to a rock and dusted it really well so they can see the rock underneath without the dust on top.
Huh.
And they're looking to do the first drilling into a rock very soon. So they kind of found a new place, then started staking out the whole area to decide what they wanted to do, and they're starting the new science for the new year.
Wow. And do you know, did they do the transition away from that? Already happened where they transitioned away from Mars time, right?
Yes, they're actually on Earth time now. They were only going to do Mars time for the first 3 months.
Okay.
And we're into month 4 and 5 now.
Okay. That makes sense. And they had
Yeah, so they actually get to, wake up with the sun and go to sleep with the sun.
Yeah, good for them. Well, very cool. Can't wait to hear more about what it's up to throughout the year.
Yes.
Heather, why don't we jump in the time machine? Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right, close the door. Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, this is a
You kept
quick
it nice
one.
and dusted, though.
Yeah. And I even charged it up, but I didn't need to really charge it. We didn't go that far.
No, we did.
Takes us to just 14 years ago, January 9th, 1996. This week in science, what happened?
1998, two
98?
teams
Oh, sorry.
of international collaborations of scientists announced that they had discovered 2 galaxies accelerating, going apart from each other at faster and faster speeds. They were accelerating. They weren't just... So there was it was sort of the breakthrough of the year, cosmological constant. Einstein said, all right, here is the universe, here's what it's doing, except there is some constant. This is my equation, however, it's not adding up. So it must have some constant. We'll call it, X, which means that the universe is going faster and faster. Don't quite know why, but that actually makes it work.
Okay.
Einstein went back and said, oh man, that's my biggest blunder ever saying that.
Yeah.
And except they actually proved it. And it was funny because they only proved it 14 years ago. It almost surprised me that it was so recent.
Yeah, we're still figuring some of this stuff out, I guess.
Yeah, people, they've got see these things and kind of say, I think this is the way things are. And now we just now have all the equipment where we're better able to analyze the universe, both on the grand scale and the subatomic scale, so that we can really get a better idea of what's going on and confuse ourselves even more in some cases.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let me recalibrate the SciByte 2000 here so that way we can look up into the sky this week.
Alrighty. Wednesday, January the 9th, at dawn, low in the southeast, Venus will actually be near the crescent moon. And the moon this week is just a little silver, almost like a smiley face, more than a crescent. And Venus in general will be rising about 45 minutes before sunrise, low in the eastern sky. Mars will be close to the end of sunset, low in the southwest. And there is a star, Fomalhaut, to its left. So there'll be 2 brighter objects. I only indicate that because there's 2 objects there. Mars is on the right because the right is the right planet.
Gotcha.
So, and Jupiter, because we all like Jupiter,
Mm-hmm.
after sundown, it'll actually be the first quote-unquote star to appear in the east, climbing high to the southeast after dark, and there'll actually be an orange star near it, but that is a star Aldebaran, not Mars. And it'll be at its highest point about 9 p.m. local time wherever you are. And Saturn, should you be a night owl, not just a gamer, but somebody that goes outside at 2 a.m., Saturn will be rising in the east to southeast, be, middle of the sky, not too high in the southeast. But right now, the rings are at an angle, so they're the most visible in the last 7 years. So it's got this rings and it sort of has a tilt. Think of a plate.
Okay.
You're looking straight at it, or you could tilt it. You could see more of the plate. So that's essentially what happens is Saturn, you can see whether it's just straight on or tilt the plate towards you, and you can see a lot more of the surface.
Very cool, Heather.
Yeah. No, Katamoblisk. I wasn't saying gamers don't leave our houses. I'm saying that not many of us want to go out at 2 a.m.
Don't
At least
forget,
that's speaking on mine.
She's a gamer who plays late often.
Yes,
Good.
but 2 a.m. is when I'm trying to go to bed then.
I hope so. All right,
Or
Heather.
that.
Well, I think that's our whole show, isn't it?
I think so.
Well, I want to give a quick mention because the author is in the chat room tonight. It's always fun because we do the show live, and Not Bryant joins us in the chat room, and he's working on an app. It's called Callisto, and it's just this might be a great way for folks to get Jupiter Broadcasting on the go on their Android app. You can go over to Callisto-app or just search for Jupiter Broadcasting in the Android Play Store. And I just want to give that a mention because you might want to maybe catch up on those episodes back catalog from SciByte, and you can find them in there. But Heather, that's all I had. So thank you for the great show.
Thank you.
And folks, go follow Heather on Twitter. She's twitter.com/Mars_JB_Mars_base.
Yes.
There you go. And she'll tweet about stuff she's up to. Otherwise, you can join us live on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv and take part in our chat room and chat along with us as we go.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of SciByte. We'll see you right back here next week.